read the chapter. Does somebody want to give us a synopsis, a summary of what we're reading? Of chapter 8.
Samuel's getting old and his sons are not that good, and people want to have a king, and Samuel's like, well, if you're going to get a king, then here's what he's going to do. And they said, we don't care, we want a king.
Okay. All right, so let's read it. And it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together, and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people, and asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons, and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands, and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed, and of your vineyards, and give them to his officers, and to his servants. And he will take your men servants, and your maid servants, and your goodliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work. And he will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us, and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken unto their voice, and make them a king. And Samuel said unto the men of Israel, Go ye every man unto his city. So it's just as Jake prepared us. We have what a king is. We have the people asking for a king. We have the Lord instructing Samuel to give the people a king. And at the beginning of it all, we have Samuel, who has appointed his two sons to be judges, and they are wicked judges. So before we get into whether or not or how we should understand their request and what a king is, what do you guys think about Samuel appointing his sons to be judges? And why is that part of the story? Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Was it a right thing? Or was it a wrong thing?
I think someone else wants to talk. I think it's kind of ironic that he made his sons judges and they were bad, and the people said, "What about a kingship where it's passed down to your sons? That's a good idea." Seems crazy. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it seems like it's a bad thing because judges? I thought they were. No.
No, they were priests, though.
Other priests. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, if he knew his own kids, then he would have known that they weren't that good of guys. And then, that seems like some poor judgment. But
Well, was there any history in Israel of a judge appointing his sons to be judges after him?
Wasn't it Gideon?
They wanted Gideon,
To be a king.
well, to be a king and to appoint his sons, right? And what did Gideon say? He said no. So the tradition in Israel, I guess if we want to call it that, would be the people say, we like you, why don't you become a king and appoint your sons after you? And the judge says no. Why Samuel did it? Why did he? We don't know, do we?
Did Moses appoint some judges to help him out?
Well, they went to the elders and they heard the cases and he took the hardest ones.
I thought he appointed some relatives of his to help him.
Well, Jethro was his father-in-law.
Yeah, but he helped him judge. Right?
He told Moses
He was the one
to,
who told him he needed
yeah.
help.
you got to have some help. Well, why is it in the story? Anybody give any thought to that? Why is Samuel appointing his sons part of this story of how kingship comes to Israel?
to me, it seems like it's part, like what I was talking about, it's kind of part of the deal. But maybe I'm off, but it makes it look even more ridiculous to want a king after your guy does kingly stuff, and it's not good for you. It just makes it look, makes the people even more bad, I guess.
So you think Samuel appointing his sons should have caused the people to reasonably do what?
Say hereditary leadership is a bad idea, probably.
So let's get rid of these
Let's not do,
two judges.
Yeah, let's not do this thing where we pass it down to kids.
Okay.
So, is that the main distinction between the judge and the king? Is the succession? Like, that's the thing that I was wondering about when I was reading this. Is like, what's really the difference between what they were asking? They wanted a king instead of these judges, and like they want a king so he can fight their battles for them, and so he can judge them. But that's what the judges were doing. They were leading them into battle, and they were judging them. So, what was special about a king? Like, they didn't want to have to wait for a judge to kind of rise up and be recognized as a judge.
Well, I think one thing, there's a distinction between earthly kings and the judges in Israel. What is that distinction? And who really was leading them into battle?
God.
Okay, so that's really the distinction. It may look like the judge is leading them in battle, but what the judge is doing is he's following the one who's going before them, which is the Lord. And so when they rejected, when they asked for a king like other nations, well, what they were asking for was a king to be their God, essentially. They were tired of God going out before them. They wanted to have a physical, earthly king who would go out before them. As far as the judging goes, I think in Canaan there was a lot of judging. I mean, there's only one authority in a kingdom. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but if you have a king, he's the only person in the entire kingdom who has any authority. Everybody else's authority is derived from him. So whatever he says goes. So, I mean, even if he appoints judges or whatever else, it's his authority that rules in those cases. Now, in the case of Israel, all of the judging that the judges did, or that the priests did, or that the Levites did, was derivative from what? God's authority as written down in their covenant scriptures, right? So I think that's, I mean, I think when we were in Judges, and maybe it was way back when we were looking at kingship when we were going through the covenants. There's all kinds of overlap between, the role, like a prophet, a priest, and a king. They all do something. What do they all do? They all teach. So they all are supposed to, and the king is supposed to what? You guys remember? Does he just store up the memory of the covenant in his head?
Read the law before the people.
Well, before he can read it, what's he supposed to do?
Write the whole thing.
Write the whole thing down and have it right there by his side, and then teach the people. So that's totally different than the tradition around them in Canaan. Well, how did they view their earthly king? The Canaanites, the Philistines. How did they view their king? Well, was he just a man who was born into the right family and
No, he had divine.
okay, he was a deity. So, I don't know if you guys do any kind of history reading or whatever, but you'll see it everywhere. Just think of Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, he's in the Bible. Think of Pharaoh. Those weren't just men. That wasn't King George living in Egypt. That was God to the Egyptians. And he reflected everything about his God was embodied in him. He's kind of like the Pope. So if you're a Catholic, whatever the Pope says is the Word of God, right? He can speak nothing wrong. And whatever he says must be done. That's kind of how it is for an earthly king in Canaan. So now you know where the tradition comes from in the Catholic Church. Straight from the land of Canaan. So when they were rejecting then the kingship of God, or when they requested a king to go out before them and win their battles, that's why God says they're not rejecting you, Samuel, they're rejecting me. Why did God allow Samuel to appoint his sons? Anybody think about that? Was that part of God's plan? Or maybe Samuel kind of snuck around and God was busy somewhere else. He didn't notice. To me, that's the providence of God. That's God working. He's sowing, or he's not sowing, but he is allowing discord in the whole nation because of Samuel's irresponsible and probably, we're not told that God told him to. So if God didn't tell him to and he did it, what's the only reasonable conclusion to come to?
It was sinful.
It was sinful. And God allowed that to happen in Israel so that what?
They would ask for a king.
Okay. So, who gave any thought to that? Was it God's plan to have a king in Israel? An earthly king?
Yeah.
Jake says no. Jake says yes. Who else? Nobody else is going to...
I say it was part of the plan.
Okay, Tim's going for part of the plan. You're going for part of the plan.
We're talking prescriptive or descriptive? Because I say it's different.
Okay, well, you can expound on that.
Well, I'd say that, we talk about God, the will of God, like what God says for us to do. And in no way was it what God was telling them to do, and was his command to them what they ought to do. They were doing the wrong thing by picking a king. But was it all part of God's eternal sovereign plan, working out his eternal purpose? Well, everything is, but this, and you see it. We have a king, and you have like King David, and being a picture of Christ, and Christ being this king that would rule forever. And all those things are worked out through this providence, through things working in this way. So in that case, I would say, yeah, it was part of God's plan.
So it's part of God's plan in the sense of everything that happens is part of God's plan.
Well, yeah, but even in a greater sense than that, like part of his plan of redemption, I think this tied in with that, of having a king, so that would point forward to another king that would come after David, Christ, king of spiritual king.
So you're saying that it is, well, what position? Are you saying it's descriptive or
Right,
prescriptive? Because I thought you were saying it's descriptive first, but now it sounds like you're saying it's prescriptive.
Well, I'm just right in the middle. I'm not taking a side.
Walking the fence. Who wants to jump on one side or the other?
It can't be both.
Descriptive and prescriptive?
Well, that's the wrong term for it, right? Because we talk about the different wills of God or whatever. That's what we're told to do, and also what God works out as He works out His purposes. I think descriptive and prescriptive is the wrong.
Well, you're saying, well, like when God gave the promise to Abram and to Sarah, that kings would come from them. Is that, you're saying that was just God telling them what was going to happen in the future? It didn't have anything to do with whether or not He wanted to have a king in Israel?
Well, what God? I mean, if something happened that wasn't what God wanted to happen, I don't know. I'm not going to say that something happened that wasn't what God wanted.
Well, are you saying that that's not God's prescriptive will then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because I think that when we have here, God is telling them, or through Samuel, He's telling them, you don't want to have a king. They're rejecting Him by going to the king. Did God want them to reject Him? I can't go that far.
Well, no, God isn't the author of sin, and He never would cause somebody to sin.
Well, I was kind of thinking they've already rejected it. They've already. That's where their hearts are.
Okay. Well, first of all, yeah, I think one of the reasons we read through the whole chapter was to see 19 and 20, or to see 20. To see 19 and 20. It wasn't only that they wanted a king so that they would be like the other nations. They wanted to be like all the other nations. So that's where Chris is coming up with their heart had already left God. Their heart wasn't with God. Did anybody read, and we're not going to come up with an answer yet to Brian's question, but I haven't forgotten it. Did anyone read Deuteronomy chapter 17?
I read the part of it you said too.
Okay. Deuteronomy 17 is an interesting chapter, not only for the verses there, but just for the whole, everything that goes before it, before we get to the part, in verse 14? Yes. Deuteronomy 17:14, when thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shalt possess it, and shalt dwell therein, and shalt say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. Thou shalt in any wise set him a king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose. If at the beginning, I think here's the way that if we want to talk about how God intended or how God instructed Israel to bring about kingship. At the beginning of the chapter, you have this. Anybody whose heart wasn't with the Lord, they were cast out of the camp and they were killed. So the people were then within Israel were all keeping God's covenant. We'll just use that term. Their heart was with the Lord, and they're listening to the Lord. If a judge, that's why the next section comes up, where you're going to take your case to the judge, and whatever the judge says, that's what you're going to do. Why? Because you're submitted unto the Lord. And so in that context then, when it comes time for a king, and you say, we want to have a king like all the other nations, you do it in this context of our heart is with you. And we want you, talking to the Lord, to choose the king that's going to rule over us. And he's going to rule over us in the sense that he's going to teach and he's going to judge according to God's word. Now that's how I understand Deuteronomy chapter 17. Amanda, what did you think when you read it? Did you think that it was just prophesying something that they were going to do that was sinful, or did you understand it as God saying this is okay as long as you do it the right way?
Well, so I think I thought of it and prophesying something that would be sinful, like the Lord allowing it because it was part of his bigger plan. But I always thought that there was a command or something where he told them not to want a king, he was their king. But I couldn't find that. I was just doing like some Google searches, and I was like, is it just this like 1 Samuel 8 where we get that idea where he says like you're rejecting me? And so I was a little bit, whatever, thinking that maybe I hadn't been thinking of it right, to think that he, under no circumstances, really wanted them to have a king, even though he was going to allow it as part of his plan. So,
Okay.
I had read this before I tried Google searching all that, so it was with that in mind. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Is there a verse where he tells them, like I've been reading through the law just in my daily reading, and I haven't come across it there that I remember, but is there a place that he says, like, you shall not have a king, I'll be your king, that you know of? I could just find things like in Psalms where it might declare him our king, or like one verse in Isaiah, one in maybe like Zephaniah, but it wasn't him saying like, I'm your king, do not take another king. But it was...
Well, God always presents himself as the king.
Okay.
And that's where we get the concept of theocracy.
Right.
So it's not, so that brings up the question then, is it an either-or proposition? Do we either have a theocracy with prophets, priests, and judges, or do we have a theocracy with king, prophets, and judges? Or kings, prophets, and priests? Do we have to choose one or the other? Or do we have, because even in God's way, there were always priests, and Moses was a prophet, so we can include prophets in that, in God's original design for the nation. So is it an either or? Once a judge comes on the scene, that was God's doing. We know that, right? God raised up a judge. So it was still a theocracy. The judge, ruled and judged according to God's word. So the judge didn't displace God as king. So is it possible that there could be a king who would not displace God as king?
Seems like it.
Why?
Well, there are a lot of ungodly kings.
Well, they would displace God as king.
Right.
So we would have to find a godly king who would not displace God as the king. Was there such an example as that? Is it possible for God to be king and there to be a human king over Israel at the same time?
Yes.
And we know that because
It can happen.
okay, there were godly kings whose heart was after the Lord, who spoke forth the word, who taught the Lord's word and ruled according to the Lord's word. Give me an example.
David.
David? Okay. Let's go all the way back now to Genesis. We're going back in time. What was Adam? How was he going to exercise dominion? Remember, God told him to go have dominion. How was he going to do that? How was he going to do that? And how were his descendants going to either carry on that tradition under Adam, or how were they going to come to know what the Lord's will was? Now, you guys do remember when we talked about dominion, when we were going through the covenants, right? I'm assuming everyone's head is shaking. I'm not going to look up. Well, how did God equip Adam to exercise his dominion?
He gave him a strong mind.
Okay.
In order, he named all the animals.
Well, what does Genesis tell us that he gave him?
I don't know.
How was he made? How about that question?
Made from the dust.
He was made from the dust
God's
in God's image. Now, what did we say that meant? It allowed communication between him and the Lord. I want to call it the communicable attributes of God he gave to Adam. The big picture is what? He knew what the Lord wanted him to do. So the Lord didn't just say, here's a man, go do whatever you want. Go by instinct or go by feeling. See what your gut tells you. Flip a coin. He didn't give him any of those resources, did he? He gave him the sure resource of a revelation to Adam, and he said, now, go forth into all the world and exercise this dominion. So, Adam then was the first king, right? Remember that? The first king. The king in all the world. And he exercised that kingship and that dominion under the authority of his God. And he exercised it perfectly because he understood perfectly everything that the Lord had instructed him to do, and he didn't have any sin that would get in the way of him performing or doing what the Lord had told him to do. That's God as king with his earthly king, vice regent, if we want to call it that. You read theological books, that's what they'll call it, if you come across that. God is king, and then you have this sub-king, who is Adam. And he rules according to God's word. So when we come, then we get to Abraham, well, we get to Noah, and Noah has the same thing. Then we come to Abraham, and then we come to Israel. And you get this, now, if you just think of the big picture of Israel going forth out of Egypt into the land of Canaan, if you think of Israel as one person, what was that one person doing? That's a biblical concept, just so we're clear. God says that Israel is my son. So there is. So Israel, as a nation, is what? They're going forth and they're conquering, they're subduing the earth, right? So as a whole, under God's leadership and as his people, they look just like a king. They're doing just what Adam was supposed to be doing. When they go into Canaan and they wipe out all the chaos, they wipe out everything that is not conformed to the will of God, is gone. And now Israel, his son, and his people, they dwell in the land that God has conquered, or that they have conquered, under the power of God. So my answer to Brian's original question is that I think God never commanded them to have a king. They didn't have to have a king. But God put everything in place, and he intended for there to be a king in Israel, because that king in Israel was going to foreshadow or prophesy of Messiah King, Jesus. So we know that it was part of God's plan. My own personal opinion about the way that they went about it here in Kings is what Chris said, that their heart was far from the Lord. They had rejected the Lord. They didn't want him to rule over them. The Philistines were a thorn in their side. They'd been going through judge after judge after judge, and there was no discernible difference between the time they first came in and the first judge was raised up by the Lord and the time of Samuel when the last judge was raised up by the Lord. Israel was in the same state of affairs. Even Eli has been, his priesthood is gone, and his judgeship was, left in a shambles. And yet still Samuel appoints his sons in that context. So the Lord was bringing about kingship, but what did the people want? What kind of king did they want? We all know who Saul was, right?
A king like the other nations.
Which meant what? What was unique about Saul? Does anybody remember?
He was really tall.
How much taller was he?
He was a foreigner.
Shoulders above all the other men or something.
From his shoulders up, he was taller than anyone else in Israel. Now, did anybody go back and read part of Hannah's song? In the beginning of 1 Samuel. Now, one of the things I may not have mentioned when we look at this is when you read it, you get this expanding picture of what's going on. So we start with a whole bunch of eyes as Hannah thanks the Lord and praises him. And then it gets a little bit bigger, and then in the sense of Israel, and then it gets really big in the sense of the ends of the earth. We'll just read the whole thing. It's too good not to. Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. Mine horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over my enemies, because I have rejoiced in thy salvation. There is none holy as the Lord. There is none beside thee. Neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more exceeding proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed." Okay, so remember, if the nation of Israel had just that part in their mind, the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed, then they would have been able to say, just give us the king that you want us to have. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumble are girded with strength. They that were full have hired out themselves for bread, and they that were hungry have stopped being hungry, so that the barren hath borne 7, and she that hath many children is waxed feeble. It's the Lord that kills and makes alive. He bringeth down to the grave, and he bringeth up. The Lord maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. He raises up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he hath set the world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength shall no man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. The Lord shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. So, we've already read this, we've already thought about it together on a Wednesday. Who here would think then that the tallest, strongest, most handsome person is probably the one that the Lord is going to choose to rule over his people? Is that the impression you get from reading that? What do you get the impression? It's probably going to be somebody on the dunghill. Some poor, weak, hungry guy who's just got nothing. And that's the one that the Lord's probably going to raise up, and he's probably the one that's going to rule over Israel. What did the people want? They didn't want the guy from the dunghill, did they? They wanted the good-looking, tall, strong, strapping young man who could go out in front of them in battle. Does anybody think it's ironic that who were they fighting? Who was the representative of the Philistines? Goliath. What was unique about Goliath? He was really big. He was really strong, wasn't he? So Israel, what did they say? That's what we want. We want our own Goliath. We want that guy to go out and fight in front of us. Somebody that we can see, somebody that we can appreciate, somebody that will rally the troops and make us feel good. We don't care about anything else. That's what we need is a hero. We need our own Achilles. We need our own Goliath. We need somebody that's like us, only bigger and stronger. It goes completely contrary to exactly what Hannah's prayer teaches us. So that's why I would say that this was a wrong. They didn't inquire of the Lord anything. They never submitted to the Lord and said, "Just give us the man of your choosing. Whoever you choose will be good enough for us." If that had been in their heart, probably Jake is right. I think that's what he said. They would have just said, "Let's get rid of these two scoundrels just because they happen to descend from Samuel, and let's ask the Lord to raise up a godly judge. Let's ask the Lord to raise up a godly priesthood that's not like Eli." That's probably what would have happened. Does that seem reasonable? That's not. They wanted to be like all the other nations. They wanted to have a king that would go before them instead of the Lord that would go before them. All right, well, we can finish the discussion next week unless we can finish tonight with anything that anybody else wants to say. If you did some prep work and you want to say something, now's your chance.
It's more of an inquiry. Is this the same, this idea of God raising up a man of lowly of nature, is that the same idea that we have about God raising men up in the church to lead a church? You know what I mean? Instead of having someone, and this may be a stretch, and it probably is, but I was just thinking of God raising up men inside the church to lead the church rather than having someone come from outside. Is that...
Well...
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I haven't been to seminary, so I'm not defending seminaries. I'm certainly not defending seminaries as an institution. But that doesn't mean that God's man couldn't have gone to a seminary somewhere, right? It doesn't mean that God's man couldn't have gone to a seminary and been part of the congregation and God raised him up.
Right, I'm not specifically singling out people coming from seminary.
Right. Well, that's usually where they come. Nobody.
Right.
I mean, nobody says, "Hey, I was picking up garbage in Tucson.
Right.
I'm in St. Louis now. You want me to pastor your church?"
Yeah.
The key would be, what do you want? What does the congregation want? Do they want a lettered man, or do they just want the Lord's man? That's where the stories would, and that's where we can make personal application to that. Do I want what the Lord wants for me, or do I want the Lord to change to get so that I can get what I want? That's what the people were saying. If you're going to be that kind of a God who's going to go before us and do all these things, then we don't want that. We want you to change and give us the man that we want and guarantee our success. So that's for us, if we want to apply it very personally, that's how we do it. If we want to apply it in the church, that's how we would do it there. We don't care if a man has letters. Great if he has letters. The brightest, most intelligent person that's ever lived, he can be a great pastor if he's the Lord's man. Amen. We'll be back in chapter 8, then we'll finish chapter 8 next week, and maybe we'll bleed into chapter 9. We'll see what goes on with questions.